Okay, I do believe that we are live and the time is 4 o'clock. So we're exactly on time, which, as most of you will realise, is unusual, really, because we're normally late with a few tech problems and sound problems, audio problems, camera problems. So today, no problems. So welcome to this week's Chen Chat, weekly Chen Chat. So we're just going to spend a few minutes waiting for a few people to get logged in. And so this week, what we're going to talk about really is questions and answers. So as you can imagine, quite often we do receive a whole kind of batch of questions that range across the whole kind of spiritual attire to a certain degree. And we thought we would we kind of go over some of those questions. There's a few that have come in, so we'll get Chen to answer those. Jane's happy the sound's good, so that's good. So we've done a sound check, video check. This isn't my lounge, as you might have noticed. I thought we'd try a different digital background for a change rather than just the boring things that we tend to use, which is the logo. So I've managed to pick this picture. So hopefully it looks as good for you guys as it does for me, really. It seems like quite a nice homely picture. So again, yes, we have lots of questions coming in. So obviously quite a lot of emails from the last week around questions and answers and that kind of stuff. And I think this is the key, really, from a spiritual perspective. We all kind of realise that there's a raft of different people. It's not our house, no. Jane's just saying it's not our house. No, it would be nice if it was our house, to be fair, because it is quite a cool picture. But yeah, so basically lots of people have, or everyone is on a different part of their spiritual path, I guess, myself and everyone else included. And therefore we all learn different things, different lessons over that time. But I think more importantly, the spiritual path is seen to be quite kind of an isolated and lonely path for many people. Most of us live in places that we either don't connect with people around us that we live with geographically that are the same. So I think this is why the online community really is so important, that we can kind of connect to and also to mix with people like us, people that are spiritual, that have spiritual experiences, people that have been through experiences that the normal mainstream, I guess, doesn't really kind of cover adequately, or other people in your life don't cover adequately at all. And we all know, that we're living in different families. Most spiritual people, I think, are probably in isolation in their families. I know for us, we're quite fortunate now, really, that myself and Jane obviously have been on this path for 20 years. So spirituality is kind of part of our normal day-to-day. And certainly for our children, they've kind of grown up since the time that Jane and I met, which was when I think my daughter was 3. So really for probably 23 years, we've been on this path, having different spiritual experiences. And of course, that's obviously led us to connecting with guides like Chen and guides before Chen. So I used to have another guide before I had Chen that was called Miranda, and she kind of came through quite strong when Jane and I first met. So we've kind of been through this big, long path. And as I say, I think for most people, it seems to feel like quite an isolated, lonely place to be, really. So trying to find people like yourself that are doing the same things, having the same sorts of experiences, looking for the same answers, I guess. And I think that's one of the things from my perspective, really, is when I became spiritual or started to have spiritual experiences, it was really hard to find other people that were having the same sorts of experiences. And probably more importantly, people that can actually answer the questions, because when you start to see into different dimensional frequencies, different realities, and you start to see different entities presenting to you, the first thought is generally that you've kind of lost the plot, gone slightly mad, slightly kind of off track, I guess, really. But I guess what's really happening is we're changing our own vibration, and based upon our own vibration, we get to see different realities, different frequencies, and that's kind of my understanding now, really, from the kind of conversations I have with Chen and from my own experience, is that everything is frequency, and the frequency that we vibrate at is the one that we kind of exist within. So different people are vibrating at different frequencies, and therefore they're having different experiences. And I guess the higher your vibration becomes, then of course the clearer the connection to spirit, the clearer the connection to your kind of own spirituality, your own higher self, your own kind of core consciousness. And therefore you start to experience things in a different way. So people that are vibrating in a state of fear and anger, negativity and rage are living in that low frequency. And of course, that's what they broadcast. So the universe mirrors that back to them. So they'll find people coming into their life with those sorts of resonant frequencies, the same as them. if we can get to a point that we kind of bring our vibration up and we start to get kind of clarity of thought and start to think about things in a more positive way, and we basically build our life through our thoughts. And as we build our life through our thoughts, that reality is then kind of attracted to us. So it is this kind of magnetic effect to a certain degree, that your reality is the one that you're attracting. And of course, we need to remember that the people around us play a big part in that. If you're living in a family where everybody else is in a state of chaos, negativity, financial concerns and worries, those sorts of things, and of course that frequency is going to bring yours down. Whereas if you can push those people away from you to a certain degree, you can then allow yourself to start to ascend and move into a kind of higher space from a frequency perspective. And this, I think, is what we're all trying to do. I think when we understand how this reality works, we understand very clearly, and lots of spiritual teachers talk about the same things really, that everything is attraction and vibration, but it all starts with your mental state, your thought process and your mind. So if you have a financial problem at the moment, you've probably got a block somewhere. So maybe you don't think you're worthy of earning money, or maybe the job that you're doing doesn't really give you kind of fulfillment. So somewhere in your own reality is going to be a block around abundance. And of course, the universe then provides you with what you're thinking, which is lack of abundance. So you kind of sit in that space that you're continually trying to earn money. Most of the time it goes out continually. And I know for myself and Jane, when we first met, we both came from divorces, we had 2 children each, that kind of thing. There was a lot of financial stress and problems, really. I can remember one point we got to a point that we had a big overdraft in the bank, and we kind of almost used the last sort of £20, $20 in our overdraft. So we were effectively completely broke, really, on paper. And that was when we sat down and thought, what were we doing wrong? We're both working hard, we're both doing lots of hours at work. I had quite a good job and quite a good income, but money just seemed to bleed out from us continually, really. So over the years, obviously, we started to realize that was the vibrational space that we were in, and we needed to change our thinking and change our decisions and choices to kind of move out of that space. And that's generally kind of what happens. So I'm just going to say hi to Geraldine. So she's got a question. So is it to ascend to die? I'm super confused. Sorry, Geraldine, I'm not quite sure what you mean, really. I guess everything is about, we're having the life that we kind of provide ourselves with, really. And I think what I'm trying to talk about here is that if, your life isn't particularly good, you're probably attracting those experiences into your life in your thought process, and you're manifesting that in your physical reality. So it's just a case of changing your mindset. And again, if you look at lots of books, spiritual teachers, they all kind of talk about, take a pad and pen, start to write down the things you want in your life, or create dream boards. And this is something that Jane and I kind of still do now, really. We've got quite a few of them up in the loft. So we sit down one night, normally have a chat of things, and we get some magazine papers out, and we kind of cut out the things in the magazines that we want, whether it be a different car. I remember at one point we wanted to have chickens, because we wanted that kind of rural lifestyle, eating your own chicken eggs, that kind of stuff. So we basically put all these things down on a dream board, and then lo and behold, 2 years later, we got the dream board down, and a lot of things on there we'd actually manifested. In fact, Jane had actually manifested the exact car she wanted, which was a red Mini at the time with a white stripe down the middle. And then when we looked outside, there was the Mini with the white stripe. So even the exact car on that dream board, she sort of manifested into her life, basically. And it hadn't happened very quickly. It had been like a couple of years, but obviously by setting the goal and starting to focus on how do you get that goal, rather than worrying about where the money's going to come from, it's just about focus on what you want, focus on what you need, and then start to change your frequency to just assume that you've already got it, basically. So we started to live as though we had enough money to kind of get by, even though we didn't really at the time. But then we started to notice things change, and of course circumstances change, jobs change, and before you know it, you're actually in a better space. And that, I think, is the kind of key thing, really. So I can see Gaz is here. Good to see you, Gaz. So Gaz is saying, ascend is to rise your vibrational frequency in order to experience life at a higher, more loving, divine state. And I think that's kind of it, really. As we raise our vibration, we ascend it upwards. And then, of course, that pulls in better, more positive experiences and people too. So if you're, if you're currently single and you're looking to manifest a relationship, rather than kind of trying to find the right person, the way to do it from a spiritual perspective is to kind of plan the person that you want. So kind of write down your list of requirements, really. So I'm looking for someone with dark hair that, looks like this, blue eyes, brown eyes, is in this space, this age group. If you kind of build the person that you want in your mind, and of course your guides will obviously help you to do that too, really, then when you've got that kind of image and you can see that image in your mind and you start to think about that person, sharing your life with that person, going out to the cinema, going for walks, maybe having a dog, that kind of thing. So basically build all of it in your mind as though it's a dream, but you need to connect to that every day, really, and to keep that energy. So the more you think about that image, the more you kind of build that energy, then of course the more you magnetize someone into your life. And the next thing you know, you end up sat by someone on a bus that you get talking to, and suddenly you just click and you kind of realize that energetically this is the person for you, and so do they, of course. The next thing you know, you think, wow, that was a coincidence. But of course, it wasn't really a coincidence, because you manifested that person into your space. And this is what Chen talks about quite often to me, really, is that just do what needs to be done and don't worry about the bigger side of it. So when Jono and I manifested SRA, Spirit Release Academy, we didn't really know exactly what we wanted. We wanted to create an organization that was kind of working with integrity, teaching the protocols that obviously we worked on with Dr. Palmer. We didn't really know how that was going to look, or how that would be, or who would be interested in doing the kind of the training. So we basically kind of sat down and just built the whole thing on paper. This is the website. This is how we're going to do the email. This is how we're going to connect people. These are the assessors that we're going to need to basically attract in to help us. These are the people that we want on our path to help us. We kind of built the whole thing effectively on the astral, I guess, really, over quite a few months. So we would sit down together once a week and we basically build, or try to manifest, these components, I guess, if you look at it that way, in terms of how do we build a worldwide organization with people all over the world in different time zones, and how do we kind of do that in a way that's done with kind of integrity, and we're working through a truthful perspective and harmonizing the energy with spirit. So if you speak to most people that kind of build any type of organization, it's hard, because you need to build a company. You've got the financial bits and pieces to do, which of course there's a lot behind the scenes. Then you've got legal obligations, running companies and things. There's a whole raft of things that have to happen for you to actually create an entity that is an organization, and certainly one that's going to be a worldwide organization. So it's kind of quite a big task to do. And it's not something that you kind of take lightly, I guess, really, but it needs to be planned and thought about. And this is kind of where we are. We basically plan where we want things to be. We don't know how it's going to happen or where the money's going to come from particularly. We just basically plan the kind of components and the kind of outbound vision, and then we just expect the right people to kind of land in our path at the right time. And that's what kind of happens, really. So we have been very fortunate to attract the right people in. So it kind of is this game that we kind of need to be able to build our reality on the astral frequency first, and then wait for that to kind of vibrate back into the physical. So anything that you want in your life, anything that needs to change, you've got to kind of change it first in your mind and be convicted. And then when you make that decision, you've got to stick with it as well. If you keep changing your mind every day, for different things, then of course everything resets itself. So you've kind of got to build this picture of exactly what you want and how you want it to be. And then of course you'll start to pull that to you. And your guides then also get the kind of nod really from you. This is what I want in my life. And it's their job to try to help you do that. And this is one of the things, again, that I find with Chen quite often. We basically set the kind of path, or he sets the path. We're expected to kind of walk it and follow it. But once we've made decisions, those decisions stay in place. So we don't keep changing things every 2 minutes. We basically spend some time deciding how we're going to deliberate over what we want and need. And then we're effectively going to kind of continue to think about that and manifest it and bring it towards us. And quite often it comes in the oddest of ways. It never comes in the way that you think. Quite often we used to think, well, if we win the lottery, we'll have loads of money, then we could do this, we could do that, we can create a spiritual retreat and do all sorts of things. But of course, the reality is that winning the lottery isn't probably going to happen, because it's not really the right way to do that. You need to build things from yourself with your own energy, so that if you do become quite successful in what you do, it's been built by you with your own integrity, your own energy. It hasn't just been gifted and given to you, because it doesn't seem to work that way, really. I think we all look at the world and think, look at all of these millionaires and billionaires and wonder why, you know, they have so much money but don't seem to do much with it from a positive perspective. But of course, it's probably been gained in different ways, where so many spiritual people, if you gave most spiritual people a few billion to spend, you know, you'd have retreats all over the world, you'd have healing centers, health centers, you know, you'd have kind of organizations and places people can go for counseling and help and kind of trauma advice and PTSD, that kind of thing. But I don't think we're quite there yet, really. So I kind of see things as the first wave, I guess, from a spiritual perspective, here to change things. And there's lots of star seeds that are here. Plenty of you on this call, I'm sure, are star seeds that you know you're here to change something. You probably don't know what you're here to do or why you're here to change anything, but you know that there's that deep feeling inside you that change is what you're here to help happen. And to do that, you probably have to find people around you that you kind of work with. And this, I think, is one of the things that become very obvious to me, is that on our own, you know, we're in a very difficult place because we can't change much. But when we group people together, the same as Chen does with these group meditations that are worldwide, you know, he groups people together all around the world in different geographies and then works through each one and connects everyone energetically. So you end up with this big energetic kind of connected vehicle that the spirit can use to change frequency in different places around the world. And obviously, if we all join together as a community and we have the same goals, the same intention, the same levels of integrity, then we can really start to make big change, because it is about changing the vibration. And that's what I tend to see when I look at the news. Not that I watch the news very often, but if I do, all you see is negativity. And you think, of course, this is the picture they want you to see, because they want you feeling as though you can't change anything and you're not really very important. But of course, the opposite is true. If we all start to have positive thoughts and we all start to think about change and peace and the good things, then of course war kind of is the opposite of that. But eventually, as the vibration rises on the planet, then obviously we push away things like war, negativity, and all of the kind of negative, corrupt aspects of society to a certain degree. So just going to go to the question. So Geraldine's asking about, how do I get over deceit? How do I let a connection go that shouldn't be attached to me anymore? It's a good question, Geraldine. I think all of us have been in positions that we've had deceitful people around us. Again, most spiritual people have been through, you know, these sorts of experiences. I know Jane has. Most people I know have had someone in their life that you know has been deceitful or corrupt or done negative things, and it's not easy to get over. Nobody can pretend it's just a case of changing your thought process, but I guess it's a case of thinking, well, okay, that was a lesson that they've taught me, so have I learned the lesson? When I enter another relationship or a connection with someone else, I'll be looking for someone that has those flags. And I think this is the way that I try to live my life now. I try to keep people out of my life that have a flag that raises it red, meaning I can't trust them. There's something about them that doesn't feel right or feels off, or they're just kind of people in chaos, basically. So try and keep away from negative people. And some of those people generally are family members. They're people in my family and in Jane's family that we don't really speak to, and we keep out on the outer boundary. We like to say the circle of trust basically is in the kind of middle of the circle. If you're not in the circle of trust, then you're basically kept outside, and that means you don't really have any effect on our life. And there are quite a few people over my life that I've kind of moved from the inside that I thought were trustworthy that turned out not to be. They could have been pushed into the outside ring of not trusted, and therefore they're not in that circle of trust anymore, and therefore I don't have a lot to do with them. And if you don't have a lot to do with them, they don't really cause you much chaos and problem. And I think this is the hard thing to do, is to push people out of your life that don't bring you anything from a positive perspective. And I know it's something that Jane and I talk about quite often. You know, we've both had friends, and you think, if you look at the friendship, what does the friendship provide you? If you go and spend time with someone, have a coffee and a chat, and you come away tired and kind of psychically vampired, and that happens time and time again, because all that person talks about is themselves and their problems, and they're just using you as a kind of vent, really. But of course, they go away feeling really positive because they've offloaded their negativity to you. Then you come home in a negative space, generally with something negative attached to you as well. And I think this is the key. So those people are those people you really want in your life. And I think if we actually start to look at our close friendships, some of those people probably need to be pushed into the outbound, see you once a year type group, because you're not having a positive effect on my life. And when we start to do that, of course, we change our vibration, we change our frequency, and we start to put boundaries in place. And this is one of the big teachings that I find running spiritual courses and meditation courses. Quite often we talk about spiritual sovereignty, meaning your energy is your own. If it's your own, you protect it vehemently, really, to stay in that kind of high vibrating positive space. But also you've got to push people away from you, because those people are bringing negativity in. They quite often have attachments with them, so either discarnate spirits or entities that are attached that are negative, and those will be quite divisive and try to bring problems into your space, into your life. And obviously we're clearing ourselves every day as part of what we do, as part of what Spirit Release Academy does, and all of our practitioners are talking about sovereignty every day. We have got a lot of Telegram groups behind the scenes that people are in, and most days people are asking for checks or asking for clearing, because you start to realize that when you maintain your own spiritual boundaries and your own spiritual sovereignty, then of course your life changes for the better, because you push away all of this low vibrating negativity, and it becomes very clear that that is the case. And I think this is the number one teaching from my perspective to most people, is to really start to look closely at your life and how people are changing your emotional state, how people are changing how you feel. And those people don't need to be in your life. And sometimes it means, relationships obviously come to an end, because if that relationship isn't working from a positive perspective, it's not working for either of you. It won't be working for you. It's not working for the other person, most probably. And again, most spiritual people seem to attract narcissistic partners into their life. And of course, narcissistic partners are self-serving and generally quite negative. And normally they've been put in your path probably as a test to control you or to keep your vibration and energy down. And we all know that from a spiritual perspective, there is this kind of spiritual war, effectively, that's always been going on. And the negative side is continually marking positive people and trying to put people in the path of that positive person to take you off your path. And I've seen it lots and lots of times over the last 20 years. I've seen really good spiritual mediums that have been on television that have had people put in their path, that have literally pulled them off their path, lost connection to the guides, lost connection to themselves, really, and literally they've been kind of stopped working. And these were really good people that were messaging in a positive way, helping people. But that negative side is continually kind of snapping at your heels, trying to find something that can be quite divisive to take you off your path. And of course, that can be substance. It can be wait for you feeling down and tired on a day and try and put someone in your life that will encourage you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do, and obviously bring your frequency and energy down and take you off your path. So these things are happening all the time around us. And I think the more we're aware that that negative side is kind of watching what you're doing and just waiting for an opening, then we start to change our friendship groups. We start to change the way we do things and the way we think, ultimately, because everything is about the way you think. Okay, so I'm just going to read some more messages. Loving yourself, Gaz is talking about, I think, to let go of pain. I think we've all been through pain, we've all been through trauma, everyone's been through negative experiences, I'm sure, certainly by the time you get to kind of our ages, at sort of 56 in my case, then of course there's a whole path of trodden negativity you've been through. But trying to get to a point that you look in the mirror and you think, do you know what, I'm actually happy with myself. I might not have a six-pack anymore, if I did have one at one point, but the six-pack's not that that important. It's not my priority anymore. Priority is the mindset and the energy and working with integrity and working to help other people. And if you do those things, suddenly you start to feel better about yourself. And we kind of realize that everybody looks in the mirror and doesn't see what they want to see. I don't think there's anyone that says, I'm perfect from a kind of physical perspective, because we're not here to be perfect. But I think if you can go to bed at night thinking that you've done your best for the day, for yourself, for your family, for people around you, for people you work with, if you've been the best version of you that you can be, I think that's a good place to start to actually love yourself and think, well, if this was my last day and I took my last breath today, I'm pretty happy with the things that I've done, the choices that I've made. And we all made negative choices. We've all done stupid things. But again, if we start to live in that space that today we're doing the right things, making the right choices and protecting our own energetics and thought process, we can actually find that love in ourselves to be happy with who we are, really. So I think that was quite a good point. Thanks, guys. Okay, Kate's here. Hi, Kate. Good to see you. And Nadine as well. Good to see you guys. So Kate's saying that she can relate to that with certain family members. It's a must to keep up those healthy boundaries. It's really hard because I would end up feeling guilty for it. But in reality, I was given no other healthy choice in that kind of situation. So I think this is the thing. We've got to do what we've got to do to get through and protect ourselves from our families. And I think this is the thing, Kate. You know, everybody I know, again, on a spiritual path has problem people in their families. And those problem people are probably placed there by the negative side to try and keep you off your path, to try and keep this chaos and problems coming in. And it does take a little while before you start to realize that only you can change it. And the only way you can change it is by stepping to one side and not allowing these people to control your emotional state and your thoughts, and spending time around people you like and you laugh with. You know, one of the things Chen says is laugh every day. It's one of the things Jane and I make sure we do. We always laugh just about every day. In fact, it's our sort of 19-year wedding anniversary today, funnily enough, and that's what we woke up laughing, that how is it already 19 years? So trying to keep that vibration light and laughing, because laughing opens the heart chakra, changes your frequency, makes you feel better. So even if you're having the worst day, go and put on something funny on TV, or go and listen to some comedian that's quite funny that you like. So it will just change that thought process, change that vibration, just have a laugh, because as Chen says to me often, this is just one big theatre show, basically. You know, you've picked your body, you've picked your costume, you're on the stage with everyone else. So we're kind of all on stage together, we're all playing our part in this big play that we're in. But one day the play ends, the curtain closes, we take our last breath, and then we go back to our spiritual self, the real part of us. So this effectively would change. And if you can imagine, if you had children and you told the children, look, live as though you're on a stage and this is a play, don't get too connected to things and material stuff and, you know, Rolex watches and all the things that we're kind of continually marketed on that mean nothing. Because when you take your last breath, the only thing you're taking with you is your experiences and your vibratory frequency and the things that you've done. All of those material things, the cars, the watches, they'll get left for someone else to sell, basically, once you've gone. And I think that's kind of one of those things, really, that we tend not to remember. It's not about collecting things on this path. In fact, the spiritual path is probably about letting go of things more than collecting things. Because if you have less things in your life to concern you that you're really deeply connected to, then you've got less things that have a hold of you, really. And effectively, you start to realize that all of these material things that we tend to chase on a kind of regular basis, daily basis, don't mean anything. It's just meaningless stuff. But the only thing that means something is your integrity, keeping your word, being trustful, speaking your truth. And Chen says this all of the time on all of the meditation groups we run, all of the development circles we run. He always says, speaking your truth that you feel is truthful is the most important thing you can do. I had a Chen chat actually last week, and the lady that was on the Chen chat, you know, Chen said to her, you know, these white lies have to stop. And she laughed, basically. And she said, well, but I've always done that, Chen. He said, no, because you're people pleasing. You're telling people what you think they want to hear, but you're lying to yourself because you don't believe those things. So these white lies that you tell are actually working against you, and they're holding your vibration down. So just speak your truth. If someone says to you, do you like my shoes? And you think, no, horrible, don't like the colour. The answer could be, as long as you're happy with your shoes, that's the main thing. They're not for me. I don't really, that colour wouldn't work for me, but I think they look great on you. And if you're happy with them, that's fine. So again, it's kind of changing the narrative, really, so that we speak our truth to people around us, but we do it in a kind of a positive way. And I think if we start thinking more about speaking our truth to our family members and our children, if the children are annoying you, am I annoying you, Mum? Yeah, you are annoying me, actually, because you're not behaving in a way that is sensible or, you know, supports that type of conversation that we want to be having. So you can speak your truth without being confrontational and without it changing the energy and becoming negative. And I think, again, this is one thing that certainly from a spiritual teaching perspective, I think it's one of the number one things that we all need to consider on a daily basis. Let's start speaking to each other truthfully. And one of Chen's things for me really is he said, obviously telepathy is coming online. The planet is changing, the frequencies are changing, they're coming in, people are becoming activated, we're starting to ascend from a species perspective, from humanity. And when that happens, people become more telepathic. And he said it won't be long before you know what someone's thinking before they open their mouth and say it. And this happens to Jane and I quite a lot, actually. We sit together and I'll be thinking about something and then she'll basically voice exactly what I've thought and vice versa. So she's picking up on my thoughts and using telepathy, and obviously I'm picking up on her thoughts with telepathy. So, it's becoming that way. But of course, if telepathy is online, no one can lie to you, because the media can't lie to you, because you'll know it's a lie and you'll know that that's not actually right. And when you talk to people, you'll know what they're thinking. So what they say, if it doesn't align with what they're thinking, then we'll know that they're not actually being truthful. And I think this is where we're going, really. And certainly my understanding is that a lot of these other species of entities that are here in this dimensional frequency, this is where they've evolved to the point is that they're using telepathy. And of course, they can read your mind, read your thoughts, and you can communicate with telepathy that way. And obviously, it's going to change society, because suddenly everything would change. All of the marketing, all the selling will change. People can't sell you things that don't do what they are supposed to do. People can't tell you things that they don't believe. If someone looks you in the eye and says, I love you, and they don't, then you would know. So, of course, as this starts to change, it's going to change our society and community. And, of course, that then pushes upwards to our sort of governments and to our organizations, that everything suddenly needs to be done with integrity and in a positive way. And I think that's where we're on that path, which is starting. And we're starting to see it, obviously, which is quite interesting. Okay, so I think from my perspective, I kind of Googled earlier like a list of top 10 spiritual questions, basically, just to kind of provide some sort of idea what they would be. And I thought it was quite interesting. So the first question, that was the number one spiritual question that everyone seems to ask, is why am I here? What is my true life purpose? And again, we're all kind of in this place where we've sort of lost connection to ourselves generally. So we don't know why we're here. We know that we were born, we're here for a reason. Some people know why they're here, what they're here to do. I sort of know now, from my perspective, when I got to sort of 32 or 33 and had my kind of spiritual awakening, it became very clear to me that I'm here to become spiritual and to understand spirituality and start to do the right things and speak the right things. And, I was interested in healing and working with people and helping people that are going through difficult experiences. So I've sort of found my path really over that 20-year period. So I kind of know why I'm here. I know that this is the work that I'll be doing until I'm not able to take my last breath, disappear the other side. I'm sure Chen will be waiting for a little party, hopefully, if I've ticked the right boxes, done the right things. So I think why am I here is something we can all deliberate on and think what gives you pleasure. When do you get that kind of feeling inside your stomach that this is me, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to be? And I think for most people, we're here to kind of work together as a species, and we're here to help other people and people that have been through difficult traumas, experiences, PTSD, all sorts of things. If you've been through those things and you've come out the other side, then you're very well placed to help other people. And that probably is one of your big true life purposes to a certain degree. And then I think that the second question that popped up was what happens when we die? Is there life after death? And I laughed at that one and thought, well, we know that that's the case. We know that there is a life. Of course, it's a spiritual life in a different frequency, because we know that a spiritual consciousness animates our physical body. So we know that when we die, that spiritual bit disappears. And all of the people that are mediums know this. They talk to their guides, they talk to deceased relatives. I was doing a clearing this morning, and one of the bookings I had was from a lady whose father passed away inadvertently, really. And I was basically checking with Chen, because we do a bereavement check to check he'd obviously moved over, which he hadn't. He was earthbound, so he was still over here. So I connected to him and had a quick chat with him. I wasn't really expecting the kind of like the run of events. So he was very, very emotional that he'd been taken early, because he was quite young, a little bit older than me, but not too much older. and he wasn't expecting to go, and he'd had a heart attack basically, and obviously passed, and never got to say, you know, things to his family and his children, that kind of stuff. And he was very emotional, kind of made, I was sort of sat in my room writing the report, and I could feel myself welling up. I could feel my, you know, the tears coming in my eyes. I thought, wow, there's an awful lot of emotion with this guy. He really, really is upset that he didn't really get to say the right things and to finish his life in that way. But of course, it obviously is proof that, you know, that conscious awareness that was him is still out there. He said to me, I'm still watching my family every day. And the last thing he wanted me to write on the report was enjoy the barbecue, which I thought was interesting, because obviously he knows that I guess they're about to have a barbecue probably on the weekend, and that message would, I'm assuming, kind of ring right for them, really. So that was his kind of, I'm still here, I'm still watching remark, which I obviously wrote down, but it did sort of, I did feel the effects of that. So that was the answer to the what happens when we die question, really. So do we choose our life path before we were born was the third question in the top 10 list of spiritual questions. So I believe that we do. We choose our life path. Obviously, I had chosen, as had Jane, that when we both had previous marriages, children with previous partners, when those marriages ended and we met each other, that was a start for both of us onto that spiritual path. I started to see entities and see things. Jane started to have other experiences too from a spiritual perspective. So that meeting of us was the basic starting point, the catalyst for both of us to get pushed onto our spiritual path. So I believe that the life path we have chosen before, again, Chen's version of it is that we can change things. We can obviously stay on the life path, we can veer off. So we do get a lot of choices. It's not kind of preordained, but in theory, as doors are opening for us, if we walk through the doors that just open for you, then you are kind of walking that path that you've probably set yourself to a certain degree, and of course attracted those people into your life too. So we're just going to say hi to Martha. Good to have you from Texas. Also to Karen. Happy anniversary, thank you. I actually remembered, which was good. And I actually bought a present and a card. So I ticked all the boxes this year, which, as Jane will tell you, is probably quite surprising. Hope's here as well. And Miriam, good to see you, Miriam. Okay, so question 4 on the list of top 10 spiritual questions that people ask is, what is the soul and how does it connect to the body? Which, of course, is quite a good question, really. So again, soul, spirit, different words, probably different meanings for different people, depending upon our sort of upbringing, cultural overlays. I see the soul basically as this kind of overarching energy that we kind of are part of. Effectively, we talk about soul fragmentation quite often in SRT and certainly in the Spirit Release Academy. So for me, the spirit is this conscious awareness that animates our physical body. So it's kind of a little part of us that is in our mind, effectively creating that. And then I kind of see the soul as this bigger piece of energy that we take fragments from effectively. And the soul really I see as like an overarching energy, but the actual spirit is the kind of manifestation of that into our physical being, is my take. So happy anniversary, lovebirds. Yeah, that's very nice, Miriam. We're quite fortunate that we are still in love, actually, 19 years on, which is cool. So we both, I think, considered to be quite lucky that we found each other when we did, because we've both been through some quite difficult times, as everybody else has, and we kind of surfaced together, which was nice. So thanks for that. Okay, question 5. Are we alone in the universe, or are we part of a larger cosmic family? So I think from my perspective, kind of, as I say, I saw entities and have seen entities for a long, long time. So I've seen all sorts of different entities, from the normal ones that we talk about, that we don't really talk about because we don't want to bring them in, we don't want to invite their energy into this conversation, but I've seen a lot of them, a lot of demonic entities, and spoken to a lot of demonic entities. Chen's cleared and removed thousands of entities from people. So for me, I kind of realised that we are part of this cosmic family, really. And quite often we kind of see ourselves as the kind of the connection, certainly to like the Pleiadians and some of those other species that we talk of that are here working with us and for us. And Chen tells me often that, you know, he has a very big team on the other side that work with us as humans to help us and to clear some of these negative energies. And that team comprises of lots and lots of other species of entities, some that we don't even know. He said you wouldn't even have names for some of them, but they're here at this time on this planet working with us and for us to help basically try to equalize the vibration and the energy. And I think a lot of us sort of realize that the Palladian species primarily is kind of us, but in the future. And they've kind of come back to maybe change some timelines and make some different decisions on our human timeline that kind of affects them in the future, which is kind of hard to think about, really, this whole timeline thing as how, but it's almost like Back to the Future. If you ever watch Back to the Future film, the concept is if you've done things and things went wrong, then obviously if you can kind of go backwards in time, you can make some different choices as a species, and then that then changes the future timeline. So I think moving backwards and forwards through time, we can all do. We do it in meditation. If we do meditation, we can do past life regressions and also future forward meditations as well. So we know that we can move our conscious awareness backwards and forwards in time. We can manifest things. So I think really we only probably use a tiny amount of our skill set because we're generally so distracted and busy doing all of the other human things that we need to do. We don't kind of think about some of the core things that we probably could do, really. But I'm convinced from my perspective that we are part of this cosmic family and we seem to be quite integral. So, you know, we talk about kind of the planet and things, but Chen's opinion of the planet is that we'd never be allowed to blow the planet up because there are other species that use this planet in different dimensional frequencies. So we're not really the custodians of it, we're just the inhabitants of it, and we're just the inhabitants of one frequency, and there are probably lots of frequencies, lots of other species that are here too. So there is this level of overriding kind of hands-off. We're allowed to develop, I guess, as a species, but we're certainly not allowed to kind of break the planet in the way that maybe we could if we tried to, which is quite a nice thing to think, really, is that whilst all these talks of wars and negativity goes on, they're generally localized, but you know, the concept of a world war where everyone kind of kills each other and detonates nuclear explosions all over the planet is this kind of dystopian future version that the media seem to quite like to sell. But the reality is, you know, these extraterrestrial entities that are here wouldn't allow that to happen. So they might allow a couple of localized problems, but they certainly wouldn't allow nuclear weapons to be detonated all over the planet because, of course, it would affect all of these other entities that are living here in different vibratory frequencies, which kind of makes sense. Makes sense to me, really. So that's kind of how I think about that from that perspective. Okay, so what's number 6? So 6, how can I know if my guidance is from spirit or my own mind? That's probably one of the biggest questions that we ever get as well, actually, in our kind of meditation groups, development groups. When you start connecting to spirit and you start doing that through meditation, you start to get thoughts that pop in your mind. And then you start to think to yourself, was that my thought or is that coming in from spirit? Is that my spirit guide talking to me? And I know lots of mediums, myself included, on that spiritual path, quite often you get these thoughts come in and you need to kind of think about it and think, was that my thought or was that coming in from somewhere else? And that's part of that kind of spiritual development platform, I guess, where we have to learn and deliberate between our own thoughts, negative thoughts that can be coming in from other entities or other attached spirit attachments, discarnate spirit, or our own thoughts. And the way I generally see that now from my perspective is if the thought is kind of benign, really, it's probably yours. If the thought is negative, it's probably an attachment, so negative entity or a negative discarnate spirit in your space, because they obviously broadcast negative thoughts and that such. And then if it's kind of a guidance, but it's positively based and it feels good, if you start to attach the emotion you feel with the words that you hear in your mind, the guidance, if it's positive, it's probably spirit guide or some sort of spiritual entity generally. But again, as part of our spiritual development, we need to get to a point that we go into meditation, we achieve our own sovereignty, so we know that our energy is our own. At that point, we should have clarity of thought, clarity of mind. Our thought process should be positive and good. And then when we reach out to connect with our intention to our spirit guide, we connect that link. I connect to Chen. I test his energy. I ask him 3 times, are you from the highest light? Yes or no, I expect to get yes, yes, yes. And then generally he'll show me a couple of pictures, which is kind of my password with him that's been set for years. And those pictures never change. They're identical, but unless I see those 2 pictures, if I don't see them, I disconnect and start the whole thing again. But that's kind of my way of basically using my intention to make sure that I'm talking to Chen. And you've all got guides. We all can do this. We all can basically learn to get that connection to our guides. And then when we start to have thoughts, we obviously can start to work on that. And one of the ways that we teach that really is with automatic writing, which is quite good. So any of you can pick up a pen today. You can start to write to yourself. You can write, "Hi, Andy," or "Hi, Hope," or "Hi, Karen. Look outside. The weather's really good. There's clouds outside. The sun's out." And then you put that intentional thought to your guide to start to connect with you and give you some sort of communication. And then you'll start to get a stream of thoughts running into your mind. And the key is not to analyze the thoughts, just write them down. So just write down what comes. And then at the end of maybe 30 seconds or a minute, you'll have some narrated written text that you won't be able to understand. And then you'll think, okay, that wasn't me, because I don't remember any of that at all particularly. So this is information coming from spirit. And automatic writing is one of the ways, of course, that's been used throughout history really to kind of give us as humanity inventions and electricity, all sorts of other things have probably come through inspired thought. But using automatic writing is a really good way to get to know that guidance and learn whether these thoughts are coming from you or your guide or from some negative space. So I think that's quite a good question for that one really. Okay, so karma. So one of the questions was about karma. Can it be changed or healed? Again, the karma question kind of comes in different people, different opinions, mainly based on religious sort of undertaking, that kind of stuff. So we'll kind of leave that one from that perspective. But I believe from a karmic perspective, if you do bad things to people, kind of expect to get bad things done to you, because everything is going to be a cycle and everything is energy. So, sort of treat people as you want to be treated is my kind of version of karma really. And then question 8 was, how do I tell if I'm on a spiritual path? Generally, if you're on a spiritual path, you're going to be thinking about yourself, meditating. And again, one of Chen's teachings really is service to self. So rather than service to others, which is what lots of people promote, Chen always promotes service to self. So make decisions for you that work for you first before other people. If you start to employ service to self, then you move yourself onto that spiritual path, because you're doing what's right for you. So I think that's quite an interesting way to see things. And it's certainly what Chen teaches really from that perspective. And then number 9 was, why do bad things happen to good people? Which I did laugh at, because I thought we all see this. We all see terrible things happening to the nicest of people. And somewhat subjective people seem to either sidestep problems or they seem to do quite well for themselves, which I guess is a good question. And again, I guess some of that probably comes down to spiritual paths, spiritual experiences, teachings, that type of thing. But certainly it's a question that I don't really have the answer for, to be honest. I like everybody else, watch these things happen to people. Sorry, that's my phone just timer going off. So, but it does seem to be that way. But maybe that is karma playing in somewhere around. Maybe the good people were bad people in a previous life. So it could be kind of karma spinning around in that way. And that question 10 on the list of 10 spiritual questions really that sparked these thoughtful, meaningful conversations was, is there such a thing as destiny? Or do we create our own reality? And I think from my perspective, I've kind of covered that on most of this talk. I believe that we do create our reality with our thoughts, the people around us. So again, if you think about your life today and thought, okay, I'm going to relive my life, who would I pick to be around me and who would I not have around me? You'd pick the people that are positive, people you can learn from, people that you have a laugh with and feel happy and comfortable with. You wouldn't probably pick some of your family members, most likely. So again, if you sort of think about it from that perspective, if you want to have a positive life, you have to spend your time around positive people, because of course your vibration raises effectively from that perspective. Okay, so I think that kind of brings that to a close. I just read Jane's message. So, okay, cool. So let's get Chen in to see what he has to say. So we had 2 questions really. One was from Claire. So Claire would want to know about room sprays and protection. So do room sprays provide any sort of protection at all from a spiritual perspective? Which is a really good question, because actually we have room sprays that we use, funnily enough. In fact, I've probably got one here, actually. Is that? Yeah, so there's a room spray there. You can see just about on the camera. But anyway, we use room sprays. And then the other question was from Joe, I think. Why do humans have out-of-body experiences? And the reason she was asking that is because most weeks, if we do a clearing for her, she has an out-of-body experience or has had an OBE. So she wanted to know why that is effectively, which is another good question that we can get Chen to cover. So let's get Chen in. He can talk about those two things and cover anything else that he wants to talk about. And I'll just set an alarm for, first alarm for 20 minutes. That should give Chen plenty of time to talk. 25 minutes he's got on the clock. Okay, I'll say goodbye for now anyway, and we'll pass over to Chen. Good day to you all. I've been waiting very patiently in the background. I can see that young Andrew has found some very interesting questions to cover this week. So I was more than happy to allow him to have centre stage to start with. But of course, I also wanted to provide the answers to the people that prompted the questions. So the first question that came was around room sprays. And obviously the concept is that you can make or buy a spray that you spray around your room. And of course, it can clear the space. So if we think about this again from a, well, from two perspectives, I guess, really. First of all, we have the physical perspective. If you make a room spray that is comprised of, let's say, water, and then you put some type of nice smell, some essential oil in, so not a synthetic artificial chemical smell, but some sort of nature-based plant. So let's think of lavender, frankincense, those sorts of things. So a few drops of that in the water obviously changes the molecular structure of the water and of course therefore the vibration. So if you then spray the room with those things, of course, that vibration is changing the space. So it smells nice from a physical perspective. And of course, those molecules of water that are so small that you cannot see them, obviously moving around the room in the air. And we know that water is cleansing. So when we go to the sea, we put our feet in the sea, or even if we sit on the beach next to the sea, we breathe in the salty air or the air. And of course, it helps to clear our lungs, clear our nasal passages. So room sprays from that perspective certainly work to clear stale odors, stagnant energy. If we look at it from a vibratory perspective, then again, you have this, if you have intention that the actual spray that you create and make, maybe you put a few crystals in with the room spray, a few drops again of your natural essence, then you spray that around the room. Now, of course, you're connecting it with intention, and that changes the frequency of vibration. So you really are now actually starting to clear the space and change the energy and change the frequency. So this does work. Room sprays do work, but they work so much better when you employ crystals into them. So you can open the top of the atomizer bottle, drop a few crystals in that maybe you've meditated on, held them in your hand, spoken to the crystals, because we know that crystal has cellular memory and we know that they vibrate at high frequencies. This is why they're used in watches. We know that if we put a quartz crystal under pressure, it oscillates and vibrates at a frequency. And of course, this is very well known, obviously, from a piezoelectric perspective. So again, if you hold a crystal in your hand and you connect to it with your intention and you ask it to clear the space or provide cleansing or clearing, or of course, you can connect it with your guides too, so their energy can be connected on the astral to that crystal. When you place that crystal in a bottle, of course, the frequency changes. So then with your intention, now you walk around a room and you're spraying room spray, you're making the room smell nice from a physical perspective. But more importantly, you're actually changing the vibratory frequencies that you can't see because you're not able to see them with your physical 3D eyes. But with intention, of course, the space is being cleared. And we know that this is done. We look at religion. Obviously, we know in churches and other religious buildings, people or priests always have smoke. They walk around chanting. They have elaborate pieces of apparatus to burn oils or bark or other things on that just, they're not there just to smell nice. They're there to cleanse the space and remove stagnant energy. And again, if you look at rooms that have lots of places whereby you can't get to them, stagnant, stale energy will sit in those spaces. And we know that Feng Shui would tell us that energy, think of energy as qi that runs in like a stream to your room. So visualize your room, open the door, and imagine a huge big stream of water coming in. Where would it go? It would run into the middle of the room first, and then it would hit a wall and start to come back upon itself. And then it will start to move out into other spaces in the room. So if you could visualize your room as a space, but see energy coming into that space, then of course you'll have stagnant areas of negative energy that will build up over time. And we know that energy is magnetized with thought and intention. So if you've had arguments, or if people have had arguments in that room, those negative spaces will be holding that resonant frequency of negativity. And maybe if you walk into a corner of a room, or you open a cupboard in your house and you suddenly feel emotionally pulled, or your emotional vibration moves downwards, you might find yourself quite emotional, you might find yourself quite angry, because you're connecting to that vibratory frequency, that negativity, that negative layer of energy. So walking around the house, opening your doors and windows and using room sprays is a very good thing to do to keep everything in harmony together. And of course, if you've had an argument, or you've had people in your house that are negative, or you've had people in your house, of course, with attachments, then those attachments will look to cause more problems, more chaos, more arguments, more emotional negativity, because they're promoting that negative frequency in your space. So keeping your space clear, cleansing, using room sprays, using crystals. Obviously, bowls of salt around the room are very good. They pull energy towards them and they cleanse space. And again, this has been known for eons, really, that salt is a very cheap commodity that you all have access to. But of course, it must be natural salt, either rock salt or sea salt. So the commercial chemical salt isn't actually salt, doesn't have the same properties, doesn't do the same work. So if you're thinking about cleansing space, bowls of salt around the room, just leave them there for a few days. And then, of course, you can remove them, pour them in the garden, or dispose of them, because, of course, they will have attracted and pulled in negative frequency and negative vibration. So hopefully that answers the question around the room spray. It was a very good question. So thank you for the person that proposed that one. And the second question was about out-of-body experiences. So as part of our clearing reports, and certainly as part of the Spirit Release Academy work, the protocols that Dr. Terence and myself developed, we would look at a physical body. And what we would see quite often is the actual spiritual vibration was not harmonized inside the physicality properly. The two things would be out of line. And quite often, if you think about people that have had anesthetics, people that have been to hospital, an anesthetic is basically a chemical that effectively paralyzes the spiritual consciousness, which is why you feel no pain when you're having an operation. It's why doctors and surgeons can cut into your physical body. You don't feel pain. The reason you don't feel pain, because you still have the same physical body, your nervous system is still there, the blood is still flowing around your body. So the only reason you don't feel pain is they've managed to separate the spiritual conscious awareness, the emotional body, from the physical body. And then, of course, when they give you the antidote effectively to the anesthetic, that spiritual body drops straight back down into the physical. But sometimes it doesn't drop in properly. It still hovers above, and then you feel very detached from reality. You'd feel very clumsy. You'll be banging into things. But most nights when you're asleep, certainly spiritual people are leaving their physical body. They're moving out onto the astral. They're working on the astral. They're connecting to spirit guides and doing things. And people that are psychic and people that are mediums are probably having out-of-body experiences most nights, just that, of course, they're not aware of it because they're asleep. But when they wake up, they may feel very fatigued and tired. Some people wake up with headaches or pains in different parts of their body. And quite often that's because the actual spiritual, emotional body, that vibration hasn't locked itself back into the physical properly. And the reason that's happened is because most psychic and spiritual people are leaving, they're moving in and out of their physicality most of the time. And of course, the more you do that, and that's what we're seeing here, Andrew's core conscious awareness, his spirit has disconnected from the physical body that I now have taken over. So my spiritual energy and core conscious awareness as Chen has taken over this physical body, which I can animate and move. And then when we decide, obviously I give it back, and young Andrew's conscious awareness comes back into the physicality. But it has to lock in properly, otherwise he will feel disconnected. He currently is having an out-of-body experience because his spirit is disconnected and dislocated from the body that he was housed in before. So again, this is quite a normal thing. So if you have reports and you're having clearings done, and those clearings highlight the fact that you're having out-of-body experiences, just take it as a normal thing. But just think about grounding yourself. The key really is when you wake up, in theory, most people should wake up, and in the old world, of course, you'd be living on the land. So you would walk outside of your tent or somewhere that you were living, and you would walk barefoot on the soil. And of course, you get the energetic connection back into Mother Earth. So the energetics connect and they pull the spiritual body back into the physical. So grounding is the key to locating those two vibratory frequencies together. So people that are not grounded are having a slight out-of-body experience. And most people have this all of the time. You just don't realize that's actually what's happening. But if you think about it with the analogy of the surgeon and the anesthetic, then it makes sense. Because, of course, you can only have surgery and not feel any pain if your spirit isn't connected to the physicality whilst that's happening. So hopefully that explains those two questions, which of course were very good questions. And I think it's quite good that you're able, the people that listen to these conversations, to pose things. So anyone that's having thoughts or you don't understand certain things, so much confusion really, of course, in the spiritual realm. Everyone seems to be a guru and everyone seems to be an expert, but the gurus and the experts generally don't agree with each other. And that tends to mean that the people that are left in the middle, that are on their spiritual path, don't really know where to listen. They don't know who to listen to. They don't know what's true. And of course, the truth is a vibration. So if you listen to someone and something feels off, something feels wrong to you, then even though that person may believe that they are speaking truth, it's not true for you because the vibration isn't equalized and harmonized. So you'd be better off disconnecting and finding someone else that's messaging in a way that aligns to your frequency and your energy. And then you will find yourself connecting to their frequency and their energy. And of course, they will help you to ascend your own frequency. If same with music, if you're listening to music that talks about demonic entities and dying and war and all of the negative things, then of course that's the vibratory frequency you're connecting to from an emotional and a conscious perspective, and that will pull your energy down very quickly. If you're listening to harps and flutes and positive music, people playing with intention in a positive way, then of course your vibration connects to that frequency and ascends, it goes upwards. So everything in your life is about what you're choosing to think and do. And I think this was the topic of conversation that Andrew hit on earlier, that everything that you do is through your thought process and from your choices. If you choose to listen to positive music that motivates you and it feels good and you're tapping your feet and you're feeling happy, music is a vibration. So you're moving to that vibration. And the more you stay in that vibration, the more positive your life will become. If you're thinking about negative things and you're in an angry state or you're around people that are in rage, negativity, then of course your vibration will slowly start to come down to align with their frequency. So if you look at the outbound circle of people that you mix with on a daily basis, your frequency is going to be in the middle. If you're mixing with a few positive people and a few negative people, then you're probably in the middle. But where you really want to be is mixing with positive people that do positive things, that speak their truth with integrity, and that will help to pull your energy upwards. And then, of course, you become the light for someone else. Because as we say often, of course, you are light beings. You broadcast light on the astral. We can find you by your light. When we work on people from a clearing perspective, when I do appointments for people, all we need is the frequency. Each one of you has your own unique frequency, and there aren't two people on the planet with the same frequency. So we don't connect to you by your name. You don't need to send your hair in like the old days. People were sending their body parts all over the world. to mediums and psychics so they could hold it and connect to them. We're purely connecting to your frequency. So once you've booked an appointment, you have a frequency of vibration that we can basically follow back. We don't need to know where you live or your name or who you are. We have your unique frequency, and that's the frequency that we use to work with. So it's a very simple system, but again, quite often humans tend to make things more complicated. And that, of course, is because of the structures that you've been programmed with, the way that you've been brought up, the way that you've been taught and schooled. And there's so much misinformation that's given out. But if you think of everything as frequency, where's your frequency? Is it low? Is it high? Where do you want it to be? Some people love to live in chaos. Some people love to live in negativity. There is a space that people find themselves in. Other people wish to be in a higher frequency, a positive place, mixing with positive people, doing positive things. So it's all about your choices, and you make those choices by your thoughts and by the people you mix with. So I think that probably ends this week's conversation, certainly from my perspective. So thank you all very much for listening, and hopefully we've answered quite a lot of important questions this week. So we will say good day to you all. I will hand back to young Andrew, and we will look forward to next week's podcast. Goodbye. Okay, so I'm back. What's the time? 1:06. So that's not bad, actually. 8 minutes. Cool. Okay, folks, I think that probably concludes this week's Chen chat. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed some of the questions. Hope has, which is nice. Great questions. Would it work to add sea salt to a room spray for cleansing the space? Kira's asking, which of course it would be. Fantastic question there. So I think really room sprays can be kind of anything that you want to put in them, really. But obviously a few crystals, bit of salt. Intention is the key, of course, really. And obviously using water, if you can get filtered water, is obviously quite good. But everything is obviously intentional, effectively. So like everything, if you just do a quick meditation with it and you ask the room spray, or connect the room spray, ask it to clear the space or give it that job to do, then effectively that's your intention, and that gets programmed into the room spray bottle. So maybe we should spend the week all making room sprays and then share them on the Facebook pages to see who's made which room sprays and how you find the space. Because I know when we cleared the house here, which we do quite often, the house feels different. You can walk in the door and it feels clear, it feels energetically different. So just walking around with some Palo Santo, or just burning a bit of smudge, or just burning some incense, that kind of thing, you can feel the space does feel different. And it feels different from an emotional perspective. And people that walk in the house will feel the clarity and the fact that it's calm and clear. So I think room sprays are a good thing for us all to do, really. So for those of you that want to make them, post them on our Facebook page, and we'll have a chat this week about making room sprays, which I think would be quite a cool thing to do. Okay, so I think that kind of covers it. Just going through the last few questions. So Kira's asking about lessons we have chosen. Yeah, I guess that's the thing, really. We never know what we've chosen, but generally most of us seem to have chosen some difficult lessons. But then I guess that's how you kind of push yourself on your spiritual path, really. Because if you weren't choosing difficult lessons, then life kind of would be probably a bit boring and probably too easy. So I guess it's the most difficult lessons are the ones that are going to work for us from a positive perspective as we kind of move forward. Okay, folks, I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks for joining, and we'll catch you again next week.